You probably do this. Maybe you did it today. Maybe you've done it so many times that you no longer notice it. You walk into a new place, and before you pay attention to the people, before you notice the details, before you consciously decide where to look, your brain has already done something else. It has searched for the exit, the door, the route, the way back, the place you could leave through if you needed to. And the most interesting part is that this rarely happens consciously. You don't think, I should locate an escape route. Your brain simply does it, automatically, quietly, in the background. Now notice something extremely important. This behavior doesn't appear only in physical spaces. It shows up in almost every area of life. Some people enter relationships already thinking about how they might leave. They start new jobs while imagining a backup plan. They accept invitations while evaluating ways to cancel later. They enter conversations looking for opportunities to end them quickly. They make plans while thinking about what could happen if everything goes wrong. They keep doors open all the time, as if an invisible part of the mind is constantly asking, what if I need to get out of here? Maybe you recognize this, maybe not as a clear thought, but as a feeling, a need to keep alternatives available, a difficulty fully surrendering to the present moment, a quiet tendency to remain partially prepared to leave. And there is a very deep reason for that, because the human brain was not designed only to seek opportunities. It was also designed to avoid entrapment. According to research in evolutionary neuroscience, one of the nervous system's fundamental priorities is preserving options for action. From a biological perspective, losing options has always represented risk. An animal without an escape route has fewer chances of survival. A trapped organism has less control over its environment. Over the course of evolution, nervous systems learned something very simple. The more exits available, the greater the sense of safety. But there is a fascinating detail. This mechanism was created for real survival situations. The problem begins when it stops activating only in response to genuine threats and starts operating all the time. There is a concept known as anticipatory contingency monitoring. The brain continuously simulates future possibilities to ensure responses are available if something happens. In small amounts, this is healthy. It helps with planning, adaptation, flexibility. But when the nervous system remains excessively activated, the mechanism expands and begins searching for exits even when none are necessary. Now notice how this appears in everyday life. You're in a meeting, but part of your mind is already thinking about how to leave if you become uncomfortable. You're on a pleasant date, yet a quiet part of the mind is evaluating signs that something could go wrong. You're finally resting, but another part is still analyzing future possibilities, as if your brain never fully allows you to be where you are. There is a highly relevant concept in cognitive psychology called conditional safety. The feeling of safety doesn't come from the present moment. It comes from the perception that an exit is available. Notice the difference. A person doesn't feel safe because they are safe. They feel safe because they believe they can escape. And that creates a very important consequence. The brain never fully learns to trust the present because it keeps investing energy in the possibility of leaving. Now imagine the impact of that over the years. The system remains partially involved, partially committed, partially present, but never completely, as if part of the mind is always packed and ready to go. And maybe that's exactly why so many people describe a feeling that is difficult to explain. The feeling of never fully relaxing, even when nothing is wrong, even when everything seems fine, even when genuine safety is present. Because the brain continues mapping possible exits. There is another fascinating concept known as entrapment vigilance. According to research on perceived threat and autonomic responses, the nervous system continuously monitors signals of restricted freedom. Not only physical freedom, emotional freedom too, social freedom as well, psychological freedom too. And that helps explain something extremely common. Some people feel intense discomfort when they realize they don't have alternatives, even when the situation is positive, even when the choice is desired. Even when nothing threatening is happening, the simple feeling that there is no immediate way out can activate the system. Now think about that. Maybe the discomfort doesn't come from the situation itself. Maybe it comes from the feeling of not having an alternative route. That helps explain why some people struggle to commit deeply, keep their options open all the time, hesitate when facing definitive decisions, feel anxious when they have to choose, avoid situations that seem permanent. Not because they are indecisive, but because the brain learned to associate freedom with having exits. And something even deeper may be happening, because this pattern doesn't always come from personality. Often, it comes from experience. According to studies on implicit learning and emotional memory, the nervous system records moments when feeling trapped led to suffering, experiences of rejection, humiliation, helplessness, prolonged conflict, unpredictable environments, situations where a person felt they had no choice. The brain learns, and then begins looking for ways to make sure it never has to experience that again. Even if the danger stayed in the past, even if the current situation is completely different, the system continues operating as if it must guarantee an exit all the time. And there is something even more surprising about this mechanism, because the brain is not always searching for a physical exit. Sometimes it searches for a mental one. And that may explain why so many people live with a kind of exhaustion they can't fully understand, because there is a huge difference between being present and being constantly prepared to leave. And over the next few minutes, we're going to explore why some brains turn life itself into a continuous map of escape routes, and how that can create a persistent sense of restlessness, even when everything appears safe. Now notice something extremely interesting. Many people believe they are simply overthinking, but in many cases, something else is actually happening. The brain is not trying to solve problems. It is trying to secure escape routes, and there is a huge difference between those two things. Solving problems uses energy for a limited period of time. Mapping exits uses energy continuously, because the work never ends. There is always one more possibility to analyze, one more scenario to predict, one more variable to consider, one more way to avoid getting trapped. And maybe that is exactly why some people experience a kind of exhaustion that is difficult to explain, a fatigue that doesn't seem proportional to what they have physically done, because much of their energy is being consumed by invisible processes running quietly in the background all the time. There is a highly important concept in cognitive neuroscience called continuous perspective simulation. The human brain has the extraordinary ability to travel into the future without ever leaving the present. It creates possibilities, projects scenarios, calculates outcomes, evaluates risks, builds alternatives. This ability played a crucial role in human survival. But there is a problem. When the nervous system enters a state of chronic hypervigilance, simulation stops being a tool and becomes a habit. Now imagine the impact of that. You're having a conversation with someone, but part of your mind is already simulating how that conversation might end. You're starting a new project, but part of your mind is already imagining failure. You're beginning a relationship, but another part is already evaluating how it would handle possible disappointment. You're living through an experience, yet part of your brain is still watching the emergency exit, as if it is never fully allowed to be present. There is another highly relevant concept called threat-divided attention. When the nervous system believes it must remain prepared, it splits cognitive resources between the present moment and possible future risks. The result is surprisingly subtle. The person appears present, but not completely. They seem relaxed, but not entirely. They seem engaged, yet part of them remains somewhere else, monitoring, calculating, observing, preparing. Now think about something important. You may have experienced this without realizing it. Maybe you've gone into a restaurant and automatically chosen a table near the exit. Maybe you've entered an auditorium and looked for doors before paying attention to the event itself. Maybe you've sat down in a room and, without consciously thinking about it, registered every possible way out. Research on environmental perception and autonomic responses suggests that the brain performs safety assessments long before conscious awareness catches up. There is a concept called automatic contextual scanning. The nervous system continuously analyzes escape routes, access points, possible obstacles, unexpected movements, environmental changes. All of this happens within fractions of a second. For most people, this mechanism gradually reduces its activity once the environment is considered safe. But in hypervigilant systems, something different happens. The monitoring does not stop, it continues. Even after the threat is gone, even after safety has been confirmed, even when there is nothing that justifies such constant observation. Now notice how this extends beyond physical environments, because the mind begins doing exactly the same thing with emotional experiences. There is a fascinating concept known as psychological escape strategies. A person is not only searching for exits from places, they search for exits from feelings, exits from conversations, exits from conflicts, exits from vulnerability, exits from emotional commitments, exits from uncertainty. And this creates something remarkably quiet, a difficulty staying with an emotion, staying with an experience, staying in a relationship, staying with discomfort without immediately searching for an alternative route. Now notice something fascinating. According to research in emotional psychology, the ability to remain present during uncomfortable internal states is one of the strongest predictors of psychological resilience. But many brains never had the opportunity to learn that, because they learned something else instead. They learned that leaving quickly reduces suffering, and once that association becomes deeply reinforced, the brain begins searching for exits automatically, even when none are needed. There is a concept known as anticipatory avoidance. The system attempts to avoid discomfort before it even arrives. It sounds intelligent, it feels protective, but it comes with a significant cost, because the brain never discovers whether escape was actually necessary. It never receives evidence that maybe it could have stayed, and so the pattern continues to strengthen, and the more it strengthens, the more automatic the search for exits becomes. Now think about something extremely common. Have you ever noticed people who say, "I need a plan B. I need another option. I need to leave a door open. I need to keep my options available"? At first glance, that sounds like prudence, and sometimes it truly is. But there is an important distinction. Prudence creates security. Hypervigilance creates dependence on alternatives. The person cannot fully relax unless an escape route is available, and when there isn't one, the system becomes restless. There is a highly relevant concept called perceived entrapment intolerance. The brain does not react only to danger. It also reacts to the feeling of having no options. And that helps explain something many people have never fully understood about themselves. Sometimes they are not running from the situation. They are running from the feeling that they cannot leave the situation. Notice the difference. It is a small distinction, but it completely changes how the behavior is understood. Now imagine someone who grew up in emotionally unpredictable environments, places where conflicts appeared without warning, where there was no consistent sense of safety, where staying alert was necessary to avoid suffering. The nervous system learns something incredibly powerful. It learns that having an exit available increases the chances of protection, and then it carries that lesson into the rest of life, even after the environment changes. Even when circumstances are completely different, even when no real threat exists. There is another important concept known as procedural survival memory. Not every lesson is stored as a conscious memory. Many are stored as automatic patterns. The body learns, the system learns, the brain learns, and then it repeats, without asking, without consulting, without explaining. That is why some people cannot understand why they live in a constant state of alertness, because the answer is not necessarily found in their thoughts. It is found in their patterns. Now notice something even deeper. Research on allostatic load shows that keeping the body in a state of continuous monitoring requires a tremendous amount of physiological resources. The brain consumes energy, the muscles remain partially prepared, attention remains mobilized, detection systems remain active. All of this requires fuel, even when nothing is happening, and maybe that is exactly why so many people feel exhausted after seemingly ordinary days. Because the strain did not come only from what they did. It came from the constant vigilance, the silent calculations, the ongoing preparation, the continuous monitoring of possibilities, as if the brain were working an invisible job 24 hours a day, But there is something even more surprising, because many times the mind is not simply searching for exits from situations. It is searching for exits from itself, exits from emotions, exits from thoughts, exits from internal sensations. And that may explain one of the most common behaviors in modern life: the almost automatic urge to escape any experience that creates discomfort. Because for some nervous systems, staying feels more dangerous than leaving. And this is where we begin to understand one of the deepest roots of human restlessness. Because maybe the problem is not that you think too much. Maybe the problem is that your brain has learned to live as though it is always searching for the next escape route. And in the next section, we'll explore something even more revealing: why some brains continue mapping exits even after they have finally found safety. Because there is a fundamental difference between being safe and believing it is safe to stay. Now notice something extremely revealing. There is a profound difference between being safe and feeling safe. At first glance, they seem like the same thing. But neurologically, they are completely different experiences. A person can be in a safe environment, surrounded by trustworthy people, living with stability, facing no immediate threat whatsoever, and yet the brain may still be searching for exits. Why? Because the nervous system does not respond only to present reality, it responds to what it has learned about reality. There is an extremely important concept in neuroscience known as neuroception. Developed by Stephen Porges as part of polyvagal theory, it describes something fascinating. The nervous system continuously evaluates safety long before the conscious mind becomes aware of it. In other words, first the body decides, then the mind creates an explanation. This completely changes the way we understand hypervigilance, because many people believe they are consciously overreacting. But often, the process began long before the thought ever appeared. The nervous system had already reached a silent conclusion: stay alert. And the mind simply follows along. Now think about something very common. Have you ever met someone who always expects disappointment, even when everything seems fine, even when nothing suggests danger? As if part of their mind keeps saying, don't trust completely, don't relax too much, don't let your guard down. There is a concept known as defensive expectation. The brain learns to remain emotionally prepared for negative outcomes, not because it wants suffering, but because it believes anticipation reduces impact. The problem is that this strategy rarely creates genuine safety. It creates only continuous vigilance. Now notice the trap. When something goes right, the brain says, stay alert. When something goes wrong, the brain says, see, I was right. Do you see it? The system creates a mechanism that is almost impossible to challenge, because every outcome ends up reinforcing the need for monitoring. And that keeps the brain permanently searching for exits. Emotional exits, cognitive exits, social exits, relational exits. There is another fascinating concept called preparation bias. Research in evolutionary psychology suggests that human beings naturally prepare more for losses than for gains. This made perfect sense in ancestral environments. Ignoring a threat could cost survival. Ignoring an opportunity rarely carried consequences that severe. But in modern life, that same tendency can become a problem, because the brain continues prioritizing protection, even when the threat no longer exists. Now imagine someone who has spent years trying to avoid mistakes, trying to avoid rejection, trying to avoid conflict, trying to avoid suffering. The mind quietly learns a rule. My job is to prevent something bad from happening. It sounds responsible. It sounds mature. It sounds wise. But often, it is simply vigilance that has become part of identity. There is an important concept known as the fusion of vigilance and competence. A person begins to believe that being alert means being intelligent, that anticipating means being prepared, that monitoring means being responsible. And then a deeper problem appears. Relaxing begins to feel careless. Resting feels irresponsible. Trusting feels reckless. and being fully present feels risky. Now notice something fascinating. Studies on chronic cognitive fatigue show that brains locked in constant monitoring gradually lose efficiency precisely because they never switch off their observation systems. It's like keeping dozens of applications running at the same time. Even when you're not actively using them, the energy cost rises, performance slows, wear and tear accumulates, and the brain keeps working without noticing, without stopping, without ever truly resting. Maybe that is exactly why so many people say something very specific. I'm tired, but I don't know why. Because the effort is invisible. It doesn't appear on the calendar. It doesn't appear on the to-do list. It doesn't appear in daily responsibilities. Yet it is happening internally. There is a monitor watching everything, all the time. Now consider something even deeper. What if the search for exits is not only an attempt to avoid pain? What if it is also an attempt to avoid vulnerability? There is a highly relevant psychological concept called emotional exposure intolerance. When the brain associates vulnerability with risk, it begins creating escape routes whenever emotionally meaningful experiences appear. This helps explain something many people have never fully understood about themselves. Why, sometimes, when a relationship starts becoming deeper, the mind begins finding flaws. Why, when a project finally starts succeeding, the urge to quit suddenly appears. Why, when happiness arrives, part of the brain begins searching for problems, not because the person wants to destroy what they have, but because emotional closeness reduces escape routes, and that can activate old protective mechanisms. Now notice something extremely important. Research on attachment theory suggests that nervous systems that learn to associate connection with unpredictability often develop unconscious distancing strategies. The brain does not say, "I'm afraid." Instead, it says, "Maybe this isn't a good idea. Maybe I need to rethink this. Maybe I should pull away. Maybe something is wrong here." And the person believes they are making a rational decision, when in reality, they may simply be following an impulse of self-protection. There's a concept called defensive rationalization. The brain creates logical explanations for decisions that actually began as automatic emotional responses. This is deeply human and incredibly common. Now imagine the impact of this across an entire lifetime. The person keeps mapping exits, keeps leaving doors open, keeps preserving alternative routes, keeps avoiding entrapment. But there is a silent consequence. They also struggle to fully immerse themselves in meaningful experiences, because every deep connection requires one thing: staying. And staying requires tolerating a certain amount of uncertainty. There is a concept in contemporary psychology called psychological flexibility. Considered one of the strongest indicators of emotional health, it describes the ability to remain present even in the face of uncertainty. Not because everything is guaranteed, but because the system no longer feels compelled to control every possibility. Do you see the difference? True safety does not emerge when every exit remains available. It emerges when the brain learns that it may not need to use them. Now notice something profoundly liberating. The goal is not to eliminate the ability to predict risk. That ability is valuable. It is part of human intelligence. The problem is not having exits. The problem is needing them in order to feel safe. Because when safety always depends on an escape route, the mind can never fully rest. There is always something to monitor, something to calculate, something to predict, something to control, and that keeps the system in constant motion. But there is an extremely important discovery that has emerged from decades of research on neuroplasticity. The brain can learn a new relationship with uncertainty, a new relationship with vulnerability, a new relationship with discomfort itself, not through force, not through an internal battle, but through repeated experiences of safe staying, little by little, gradually, without violence, without urgency, without demanding perfection. Because perhaps true transformation does not happen when you find the perfect exit. Perhaps it happens when the brain realizes that it can remain, even without knowing exactly what comes next. And there is something even deeper beneath all of this. Because in many cases, the mind is not only searching for exits from situations or exits from emotions, it is trying to escape a very specific feeling that it has carried for years, a quiet feeling that it must remain alert in order to deserve safety. And that is exactly what we will explore in the final section. Because perhaps the biggest reason some brains never stop mapping exits is not fear of the world. Perhaps it is fear of letting go of the role of guardian they have carried for so long. Now notice something deeply important. Perhaps the hardest part of letting go of hypervigilance is not learning to trust the world. Perhaps it is learning to trust yourself. Because many people have spent so long functioning as the constant observer, the permanent monitor, the contingency planner, that at some point the behavior stopped feeling like a strategy. It started feeling like an identity, and that changes everything. Because when a behavior becomes part of your identity, letting it go can feel like losing a part of who you are. Think about that for a moment. If for years, your mind believed its job was to predict problems, avoid mistakes, anticipate risks, identify threats, find exits, keep everything under control, what happens when you try to stop? Often, a strange feeling appears, a feeling of uselessness, as if something important is no longer being done, even when there is no real problem at all. There is a fascinating concept in psychology called protection-based identity. The brain begins to associate personal value with the ability to stay vigilant. The person does not simply feel careful. They feel responsible for the emotional safety of everything around them. And that creates a tremendous burden, because no one can monitor every variable in life. No one can anticipate every outcome. No one can eliminate every possibility of pain, yet the mind keeps trying. And that is exactly what creates exhaustion. Now notice something revealing. Throughout this video, we explored several concepts that help explain why some brains are always searching for the exit. We talked about predictive mapping, automatic threat monitoring, adaptive hypervigilance, implicit safety learning, defensive expectation, preparation bias, the fusion of vigilance and competence, defensive rationalization, psychological flexibility, neuroception, and unconscious self-protection strategies. All of these concepts point toward the same conclusion. Your brain is not looking for exits because there is something wrong with you. Your brain is looking for exits because it learned that doing so was necessary, and that distinction is enormous because it transforms blame into understanding, it transforms judgment into curiosity, it transforms perceived weakness into learned adaptation. And perhaps you are beginning to notice something you have never considered before. Maybe you are not an excessively worried person. Maybe you are someone whose nervous system learned to survive by observing. Maybe you are not controlling. Maybe your brain learned that predicting felt safer than trusting. Maybe you are not always trying to escape. Maybe you are simply repeating an old protective mechanism, and understanding that changes your relationship with your own behavior completely. Because what is understood no longer feels like a mysterious flaw. It becomes an observable pattern, and what can be observed can also be changed. There is an extremely important concept in modern neuroscience called metacognition. The ability to notice your own patterns while they are happening, not afterward, not when everything is over, but during the process itself. It is the moment you realize, my mind is looking for an exit again. Not because there is danger, but because this is an old habit. That brief moment of recognition is powerful, because it creates distance between you and the pattern. You stop being the behavior and begin observing it. According to research in clinical mindfulness, acceptance and commitment therapy, and contemplative neuroscience, this ability to observe significantly reduces automatic identification with thoughts and impulses. And perhaps that is exactly where change begins. Not when the brain completely stops searching for exits, but when you stop believing you must follow every exit it finds. Now imagine this. You enter a new situation, and your mind immediately starts calculating escape routes. It starts predicting scenarios, imagining possibilities, monitoring everything. But this time, something different happens. You recognize the process, you notice the pattern, and you quietly say, My brain is trying to protect me, not something is wrong, not I need to fix this immediately. Simply, my brain is trying to protect me. That shift may seem small, but neurologically, it is enormous. Because it reduces internal conflict. And when conflict decreases, the nervous system begins to relax, little by little, gradually, without needing to win a battle against yourself. There is something deeply liberating about realizing that you do not need to eliminate hypervigilance in order to regain peace. You only need to stop obeying it automatically, because a healthy brain still detects risks, still evaluates possibilities, still learns from experience. The difference is that it also knows how to recognize safety. It knows how to stay, how to rest, how to stop searching for exits when there is no need to escape. And perhaps that is exactly what many modern nervous systems have forgotten. Not how to detect threats, but how to recognize when the threat is over. Now consider something extremely important. Research on emotional safety and autonomic regulation suggests that recovery from hypervigilance does not happen when we find a perfectly safe environment. It happens when we accumulate enough experiences that show the brain that not every uncertainty ends in danger. Not every silence is the beginning of a problem. Not every calm moment is temporary. Not every vulnerability leads to pain. Not every door needs to remain open. The brain learns through repetition. That is how it learned to stay vigilant, and that is how it relearns how to rest, little by little, experience after experience, moment after moment, until something begins to change. You walk into a new place and no longer feel the need to identify every exit immediately. You begin a conversation and no longer rehearse every possible outcome. You rest and no longer feel compelled to keep watching. You experience something good and no longer search for the hidden problem inside it. And then you notice something surprising. The energy once consumed by vigilance begins to return, because constantly monitoring the world requires effort, a tremendous amount of effort, an effort so quiet that many people spend years without realizing they are doing it. Perhaps that is why so many people feel exhausted without understanding why. Because they are not simply living, they are observing their lives every moment. And constant observation consumes resources. It consumes attention. It consumes energy. It consumes presence. It consumes peace. But there is good news. The same brain that learned to stay vigilant can also learn to stay present. The same system that learned to search for exits can also learn to recognize when there is no need to run. And that does not require perfection. It does not require total control. It does not require eliminating every thought. It requires something far more human: practice, consistency, and understanding. Because no one unlearns years of vigilance in a single day. But every process of change begins the moment you finally recognize the pattern. And perhaps that is exactly what happened here today. Perhaps you identified something you have been doing for years without realizing it. Perhaps you discovered that your mind is constantly mapping exits, not because something is wrong with it, but because it has been trying to keep you safe. And perhaps that understanding alone is already the first step towards something new. Now tell me in the comments, what part of this video stood out to you the most? Was it discovering that the brain seeks predictability more than happiness? Was it understanding that hypervigilance can become part of identity? Was it realizing that your mind may be searching for exits even when there is no danger? Or was it understanding that observing a pattern is different from being the pattern? Write a word, a sentence, or an insight that came to you while listening. Because very often, what we are able to name no longer controls us in the same way. And if this video resonated with you, the next topic may be even more important. Because there is a behavior that often appears shortly after the brain learns to live in constant vigilance. A behavior so common that millions of people believe it is simply part of their personality, when in reality, it may be a quiet sign of a nervous system that never learned how to fully switch off its monitoring. In the next video, we will explore why some people feel responsible for everything, for problems, for other people's emotions, for outcomes, for possible consequences, as if they are carrying an invisible weight that no one else can see. Because very often, the same mind that is always searching for the exit also believes it must make sure nothing goes wrong. And understanding that connection can completely transform the way you view your own mental exhaustion.